Thomas and the Trucks brings our main character to the lowest point in his first character arc. In episode 5, he was humbled. Here, he ends up in real danger. And after we go step by step through the story, I will talk about the effect it has on him as a character. I'm bitter, timestamps on screen, or in the description, or if I've figured out how to do it, there actually should be video chapters on this one. Let's get through the episode walkthrough, so we can get to the meat of the video. This story opens with a night scene, with the engines all in the sheds. The last episode, Thomas still wasn't happy. He wanted to see the world, as he put it. The other engines were getting annoyed with him. Edward was a kind soul, though, and felt sorry for Thomas. He offered to trade jobs so Thomas could take one of his trains tomorrow. The next morning, they asked their crews, who agree to the change. Thomas goes about preparing his train, and he bumps into the trucks hard. Edward knows trucks well, but Thomas has little to no experience with them. If an engine isn't careful, trucks will throw them off the rails. Edward tried to warn him, but like last episode, he was too excited to listen. When the train was ready, and the guard blew his whistle, Thomas started off. The trucks didn't want to go, but Thomas didn't give them a choice. The now quite annoyed trucks grumbled, but didn't do anything stupid. Yet. Thomas began to pick up speed as he was passing through Henry's tunnel. He was having a great time, very proud of himself. But when he reached Gordon's Hill, it nearly beat him. He struggled, but he did reach the top, and at the top, they started to put the brakes on to make the descent safer. Thomas tried, but the trucks had a better idea, pushing him downhill as revenge for disturbing their peace this morning. Before Thomas could come to a stop on the hill, they had become a runaway. Thomas is terrified, and the trucks are rattling and laughing behind him, trying to gain more and more speed. They get to some relatively level ground and pass through a station. Thomas, still fighting for his life, gets diverted into the goods yard at speed and shuts his eyes. When he opens them, he finds he's stopped just in front of the buffers, and a strangely familiar man is standing on a giant pile of blocks, watching him. Sir Topham asks him what he's doing here, and Thomas tells the truth. He brought Edward's trucks, and he was pushed downhill. Despite this being the second time the station pilot has nearly come to serious harm, the Fat Controller isn't particularly upset. And this is a quote, "After pushing trucks around here for a few weeks, you'll know almost as much about them as Edward. Then you'll be a really useful engine." The last shot in the episode is Thomas reversing out of the siding and into the station platform. The review. First, the visuals. This episode looks great. Even when watching the remaster, I didn't find any big visual issues. The sets look good, the aesthetic is consistent. I don't have a lot to say here, it's just good. The music. Now the music here is something special. Again, I don't actually have all that much to say, but I'm pretty sure most of the music in this episode is a single piece, and it was only ever used for this episode. You can find it recreated on YouTube. I don't know if you can find the original without narration over it. It's worth hearing on its own if that sort of thing interests you. The song alone can tell you the story of the episode. It's pretty impressive. We've got 3 characters in this story, each of them being expanded upon in some way. With Edward, we see that he's nice to a fault. Sure, he forgave Gordon earlier, but here he saw Thomas's desire to get out of the yard and let him take a train that was dangerous for somebody with no experience. This is, I believe, the first real character flaw we see in Edward, even if it doesn't get touched on much in the story. Or it doesn't get touched on at all, actually. Sir Topham Hatt he used to be seen as just an angry authority figure, really, but here he's seen to be sort of forgiving, adding another dimension to his character. He's more than that. He did punish Thomas, he had to, but in a way that allowed him to be out of his yard, to see more of the world. Thomas got what he wanted, and learned that there's more to pulling trains here than just getting out of the yard. In the last episode, he mentioned that Henry said pulling trains is hard work. Here, we see what Henry meant. We get to see in the next episode how it's not made Thomas depressed, but it certainly has tempered him a bit. It's rounded his personality a little more. He's growing up in these first stories, and you can really feel it between this episode and the next. The Runaway. The main component of this story. It's realistic. Aside from the trains having faces, of course. This is something that used to happen regularly, somewhat. Tender engines were favored for this type of work, not because of power, but because the tender itself has brakes, making it easier to stop. For loose-coupled, non-vacuum fitted trains, the slack in couplings could allow starting off to be easier, the momentum of each wagon rolling making it easier to start the next. Down hills, though, the trucks would inevitably press against the locomotive. If brakes are set properly, this shouldn't be a problem. It's not a problem anymore thanks to modern braking systems, but at one point they were common enough that there's multiple songs about runaway trains. The realistic main event, the way the dangers played seriously, the character growth, so many big positives to this story, and then good music and pleasing visuals. Within its season, this is a 9 out of 10. Fantastic. Next episode's a really good one, and it wraps up Thomas's first full character arc in the series. I'll see y'all for that one out in a week.